Most people assume modern home security began with alarm systems, motion sensors, and surveillance cameras. But, long before electronics guarded private property, wartime civilians were quietly developing defensive methods that remain effective even now. During the Second World War, millions of ordinary households were forced to treat their homes as potential targets, not just for bombing, but for infiltration, theft, sabotage, and opportunistic crime in cities where normal policing had been stretched thin. What's often overlooked is that these wartime civilians didn't simply endure danger, they engineered layered, practical, low-technology security systems that modern security professionals still recognize as fundamentally sound. Many techniques widely recommended today, controlled lighting, reinforced entry points, noise-triggered alerts, and environmental deterrence, were refined under conditions of national emergency. They were born not from consumer convenience, but from necessity. And here's the part most people never consider. These measures weren't theoretical. They were tested nightly in blackout cities, under rationing, amid evacuation, and during sustained social disruption. The modern concept of home hardening owes far more to wartime civilian survival than to the late 20th century security industry. If you value in-depth historical analysis that reveals practical lessons hidden inside past crises, subscribe to the Survival Record. Because this story is not about gadgets, it's about how ordinary households became defensive systems. Civilian homes became strategic spaces once total war erased the boundary between battlefield and neighborhood. When bombing campaigns began targeting cities, governments realized something new about modern war. The home itself had become part of national defense. In Britain, the Ministry of Home Security issued detailed instructions not just about sheltering from bombs, but about securing residential space against visibility, intrusion, and disruption. Blackout regulations are often remembered as aviation countermeasures designed to prevent enemy pilots from identifying urban targets. But at street level, blackout discipline fundamentally transformed domestic security. Exterior lighting disappeared, visibility collapsed, nighttime movement became difficult to track. Police coverage thinned as resources shifted toward emergency response. This created ideal conditions for burglary, espionage, and unauthorized movement. Homes were no longer merely vulnerable to air attack. They were exposed to human intrusion under cover of darkness. Residents responded by redesigning how homes functioned at night. Windows were sealed with layered blackout curtains that did more than block light. They prevented silhouettes, concealed interior movement, and eliminated visual confirmation that a house was occupied or empty. In modern security language, this is environmental concealment, denying potential intruders situational awareness. Cities like London learned quickly that concealment works both ways. If outsiders cannot observe interior activity, they cannot easily plan entry. The blackout became a defensive perimeter extending across entire urban districts. Even today, security professionals still emphasize visibility control. Limiting what can be seen from outside remains one of the simplest and most effective protective measures. Wartime civilians didn't frame it that way, but they practiced it rigorously. Layered entry denial replaced simple locks once police protection could no longer be assumed. Before the war, most homes relied on single locking mechanisms. After sustained bombing began, residents understood something critical. Emergency conditions reduce response time from authorities. If someone forces entry, assistance may not arrive quickly, or at all. This realization spread through training programs run by organizations such as the British Home Guard, which advised civilians on defensive preparation. Homes began adopting layered entry denial, a principle that now forms the backbone of modern security design. Doors were reinforced internally with crossbars, braces, or secondary locking points. Hinges were strengthened, frames were anchored. Many households installed improvised structural reinforcement using materials already available, timber beams, metal brackets, even salvaged machinery components. The concept was simple but powerful. Each barrier buys time. Time discourages intruders. Time allows response. Time changes risk calculations. Modern home security manuals describe this as resistance time, the duration a structure can delay forced entry. During the war, this was not a theoretical model. It was daily survival logic. Wartime fear of infiltration forced civilians to adopt controlled access and observation habits. Bombing was not the only threat shaping home security. Governments feared covert infiltration, saboteurs, spies, or opportunistic criminals exploiting evacuation and displacement. Prime Minister Winston Churchill publicly warned of internal threats during the early war period. While some fears were exaggerated, they produced real behavioral changes. Households adopted controlled entry practices that today resemble standard personal security protocols. Doors were not opened automatically. Identity confirmation became routine. Peepholes, viewing slits, and secondary barriers allowed communication without exposure. Neighborhood watch systems formed organically, supported by air raid wardens and local defense volunteers. This distributed vigilance transformed entire residential blocks into cooperative surveillance networks. Security professionals today describe this as territorial reinforcement, residents collectively monitoring shared space. But in wartime, it emerged spontaneously because centralized control could not cover every street. Fear of infiltration from Nazi Germany may have been partly psychological, but the resulting defensive behaviors were structurally effective. They reduced anonymity, they increased detection probability, they discouraged opportunistic intrusion. Modern community policing models trace conceptual roots to these wartime practices. These methods endured because they addressed permanent vulnerabilities rather than temporary threats. The reason these World War II-era security practices remain effective is simple: they respond to conditions that never disappear. Visibility still informs targeting decisions. Entry resistance still shapes intruder behavior. Early detection still prevents escalation. Controlled access still reduces vulnerability. War forced civilians to strip security down to fundamentals. No marketing, no convenience design, only survival logic tested under stress. After the war, many households quietly retained reinforced doors, layered curtains, and mechanical alerts, not because they feared invasion, but because the methods worked. Over time, commercial security systems would automate these principles, but the architecture remained the same. Even modern crime prevention research confirms what wartime civilians discovered under pressure. Most intrusion is opportunistic, risk-sensitive, and time-limited. Small increases in difficulty produce large decreases in attempts. The civilian home front of the 1940s became a laboratory for defensive living. Remembering these overlooked adaptations reveals how ordinary people reshape survival under pressure. When history focuses only on battles and military strategy, it misses something essential. The survival of societies depends not just on armies, but on how civilians adapt daily life to prolonged danger. The quiet transformation of household security during the Second World War demonstrates how quickly human environments can be redesigned when stability disappears. It also shows how effective solutions often emerge, not from technological innovation, but from disciplined observation of vulnerability. These were not temporary wartime improvisations. They were foundational lessons about control, awareness, and resilience, lessons still relevant wherever uncertainty exists. Understanding them reminds us that preparedness is not a modern trend. It is a recurring response to instability, refined across generations that faced conditions more severe than most people experience today. If you found value in exploring this overlooked dimension of wartime survival and how its lessons still shape the way we protect our homes, subscribe to the Survival Record and share this video with others who appreciate careful, grounded historical analysis. Because sometimes the most important defenses are the ones history nearly forgets.